Discretion, used 9 times in 9 verses of the Bible. The act of sound and right judgment before God and men.
Now, great evil is conquered when men and women of faith are willing to take a divine invasion. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Rod Hemden.
And I'm Janice.
Welcome. This is the Quick Study television program. It is great to have you with us today as we continue to study through the Bible. If you're following along in your very own personal Quick Study Wise Guide, we are reading from Exodus 1 to 3. Ladies and gentlemen, beginning the book of Exodus, we have a divine invasion today, and we're going to focus specifically on Exodus chapter 2. Now remember, the first 5 heroes of the Bible in Exodus are women. This is going to be a very interesting study. Corey, what's up for Bible archaeology today?
Well, this one excites me. We are taking a look at a couple different candidates for the Pharaoh of the Exodus.
All right, so this is a big controversy in the archaeological and historical community because everybody thinks it's Ramesses II or whatever, but we don't really think so. So Corey's going to explain herself a little bit later on. Janice also has a Do You Know segment. Janice?
Do you know where Moses fled from Pharaoh when he killed the Egyptian?
All right, this is a very interesting day today because we're dealing with geography, we're dealing with political figures, and we're also dealing with heroes of the Bible, and all of that involving a divine invasion. God is synchronizing all things to work for his will to bring Moses, if you would, out of the water. That's what his name means, drawn from the water, named by Pharaoh's daughter. Stay there, we'll continue.
Today we begin reading in the book of Exodus. Now, people get so passionately involved with the idea of who is the Pharaoh of the Exodus and when did it happen. Today, you and I are going to be taking a look at a couple different theories.
The second king of Dynasty 12 was Sesostris I, and some people see him as the Pharaoh of Joseph's day. He did have an unusually powerful vizier named Mentuhotep. A large water-bringing canal was dug during their time, and a governor left a tomb inscription boasting, "In the years of famine I had tilled all the fields and preserved the food which it produced." These preventative measures are strikingly similar to those in Genesis 41. Soon after, there is an aggressive pharaoh who fits the Bible's description of a king oppressing Israel. A slave list from his time names many Semitic names, confirming Israel could have been in the land. 2 later pharaohs bear an interesting resemblance to Moses' adoptive family. Pharaoh Amenemhet II had no sons, we can confirm, just daughters. Yet he did have a male co-regent for some time who mysteriously disappears, and when the king dies, his daughter Sebeknefru takes the throne. Could Sebeknefru be the daughter engaged in fertility rituals to the Nile who fatefully found baby Moses? Could Moses be an explanation for this mysterious co-regent disappearing to Midian after a crime against Egypt? Finally, we come to the Pharaoh of the Exodus himself. In this theory, that's Nefertep I. His mummy has never been found, fitting the biblical drowning in the Red Sea, And though he had a son, that son doesn't become Pharaoh, a possible death of the firstborn casualty. The economic and political disaster resulting from the plagues, loss of slaves, and death of the army can perhaps be seen in the invasion of Egypt by the Hyksos people. The ancient claim that they took over Egypt without a fight has long been puzzling, unless, of course, the nation had just lost everything.
Well, it's time to explore the wise guys of the Bible, and they're all around us. We look at the wisdom of God through his men. Now, at least 2 pharaohs of Egypt during the time of Moses were filled with demons. Now, the book of Exodus sets up a hellish condition in which Moses is born. You see, the official political policy for Hebrew boys in Egypt was post-birth abortion. Male children were murdered by ancient Egyptians after they were born. But in this very dark and terrifying time, God plans a divine invasion into the house of Pharaoh. So the wise guys of Exodus 2 were actually women, the mother and the sister of Moses, who restored Moses to life in the very house of the child killer, Pharaoh.
Exodus 2, 1 through 10. And a man of the house of Levi went and took as a wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to the Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said, "Go." So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." Exodus 2, verses 1 through 10.
The book of Exodus means to come out, or the exit, if you would. My mother used to say to me, "I think it'd be a great idea to have a taxi cab service called Exodus." Well, perhaps. But the idea is that it's the coming out, because it's all about Israel coming out of bondage and coming out of Egypt. Now remember that what has happened here is Pharaoh thinks he's God. A new Pharaoh arose that was not like the Pharaoh in the time of Joseph, where the Israelites had favor. This new Pharaoh was jealous of the Israelites, he was concerned about them, and he turned the entire nation into slaves. And the people of Israel were crying out to God. As a matter of fact, so desperately terrified was this Pharaoh in this supernatural demonic fear of God's people that he ordered the killing of every male child in the Hebrew household. This is a brutal homicide. This is unlike anything we've seen in the history of humanity. Now, here's what is interesting. In the midst of this hell and this death, God brings a deliverer. I love this part. And today we enter in Exodus chapter 2, and we see two more heroes of the first 3 chapters of Exodus. Of course, the first 3 are the midwives in Exodus chapter 1. Now, here is what is interesting to me. What's interesting to me is that we can learn from this divine invasion. And so today, when we learn from this divine invasion of how to conquer and how to win, it becomes important to us to learn from the wisdom. So let's look at Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 to 4, and the conditions. Let's witness the birth of Moses in these conditions. And a man of the house of Levi went and took a wife, the daughter of Levi. So they're Levites. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him for 3 months. But you know, when she could no longer hide him, she took him and put a little ark of brushes together, and she dabbed it around with asphalt and pitch to make it waterproof. And she put the child in it and laid it in the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. I don't know what kind of faith it took for Moses' mother, Jochebed, to be able to pull that off. But I'll tell you what, she had faith. And that brings me to this point about divine invasions. And some of us need divine invasions in our life today, don't we? Well, here's the first study-wise point. Divine invasions conquer evil when men and women of faith are willing to take great steps of faith in God. Now, beloved, listen to this. This is a woman who loves her child. This is a woman who does not want to see her. So she comes up with this idea, probably because she knew that the river Nile was considered sacred in ancient Egypt. She puts it in the river and she floats it in over by the reeds by Pharaoh's household. And she is taking a great leap of faith here. What will happen to my child? And they watch as they took this step of faith. What an amazing thing. Now, verse 5 goes on to say, then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. Now, they probably knew this was going to happen because this was her habit. And her maidens walked along the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she opened this little thing, she saw a child, and behold, the baby began to cry. So she had compassion upon him and said, this is one of the Hebrew children. And then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may be able to nurse the child for you? What an amazing setup. God uses the compassion of Pharaoh's daughter to a crying baby. Now listen carefully. God uses the helplessness of a crying baby for a divine invasion. Does that sound familiar? Here is the divine invasion point. Divine invasions will conquer terror when we recognize God's opportunities for salvation, have the courage to present those opportunities for salvation. The humility of Jesus Christ in the gospel is powerful. Finally, in verses 8 to 10, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And so the maiden went and called the child's mother, that is Moses' mother. And then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take the child away and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. I'll pay you wages. She's getting paid to be a mother that she already is. So the women took the child and nursed him, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, because I drew him from the water. What an amazing step of faith. Now, that brings me to this study-wise point, and here it is. Divine invasions will destroy the evil in our lives when we are willing to give back to God that which He has given us. I want to talk to you just for a minute about that. There's been a lot of emphasis, on the blessings of God. And we've heard songs. The Prayer of Jabez was a book that went out, and it was all about, Lord, bless me, and I no longer want to be poor, I want to be rich. I no longer want to be somehow humiliated. I want to be able to have dignity and pride, and there's all this going on. And I fear we've misunderstood it. Beloved, divine invasions happen when we are willing to understand that the blessings of God, and they do come, belong to God, because we are His bondservants. Peter, John, Paul all said the same thing. I am a bondservant of Christ. It means a slave. And a slave of Christ does not own anything, but he gives all to his master. That's what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6 when he said, "Seek first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added unto you." Here we see in this great story the wisdom and the power of divine invasion. Every step of the way was a vulnerability, a weakness, an injustice. Whether it was the killing of the Hebrew child, whether it was the injustice of a mother having to give up her child, whether it was the injustice of the child being exposed to the mercy of Pharaoh's daughter, a pagan woman, or whether it was Moses' mother, Jochebed, having to give back the child to Pharaoh's household. And in Pharaoh's household, Moses would be trained so that later on, when he brought the people out of Israel, he would be very aware of the disposition of the religions of Pharaoh. Beloved, if you need a divine invasion in your life today, it's going to take all that you have. Give it all to Jesus. All of it. Let go and let God. This is wisdom.
Earlier in the program, you and I looked at one popular theory about who the Pharaoh of the Exodus actually was. Right now, we're going to look at another popular theory just to give you some diversities when you're trying to decide what you believe.
Many men and women have tried to correctly identify the Pharaoh of the Exodus. The Bible does not give the Pharaoh's name or age, but it does give direct and indirect details pertaining to his reign. One of the initial factors for identification is searching the correct time period. Using only the Bible's dates and records, the Exodus event is dated to around 1446 BC, when, according to Egyptian high chronology, Amenhotep II was pharaoh in Egypt. Amenhotep II took over from his father Thutmose III, and records from the beginning of his reign paint him as a proud man, boasting of his athletic success as an archer, a runner, and a warrior. Records from his first military campaign record him brutally displaying the bodies of 7 conquered princes to display his own fierceness. The timing and arrogant attitude of this pharaoh seem consistent with the Pharaoh of the Exodus. It is also known that Amenhotep II was not a firstborn son, so he would have survived the 10th plague of Egypt, which was the death of all firstborn children. Well, Amenhotep's own firstborn son appears to have died, as it is one of his younger sons that would eventually become pharaoh. A contentious issue is whether or not the Pharaoh of the Exodus need to have died in the Red Sea. The scripture seems to indicate that he did, but many believe he may not have, as the scripture does not explicitly state it. In this case, the fact that Amenhotep II seems to rule beyond the date of the Exodus in a much humbled Egypt does not bother many scholars. But others favor the theory that one of his sons took over his name and ruled for him. Regardless, after the Exodus would have occurred, Amenhotep II is seen to launch 2 military campaigns that have him bringing back a baffling amount of prisoners of war and military weaponry. The campaigns were about raiding the enemy, indicating a need to restock slaves and military might.
What is prophecy, really? Is there really such a thing as prophecy or a prophet in today's modern world? In the last 2 years, many so-called prophets, many of them biblical prophets, they claim, have predicted the end of time and all kinds of events. But much of it has not come true. Join the Quick Study on-air ministry team as they tackle the difficult subject of biblical prophecy and biblical prophets in today's world. To get your copy today, video DVD of Prophecy, What Is It According to the Bible, send $25 or more to P.O. Box 456, Orangeville, Ontario, L9W5G2. In the United States, send to P.O. Box 150, Murraysville, Pennsylvania, 15668-0150. Or you can call at 519-940-8338. Or in the U.S., 724-733-8336.
Now, in the book of Genesis, when we were studying Abraham, there are quite a few chapters dedicated to that. But when we get into Exodus, we go from Moses being born as a baby in a time of very great distress to chapter 4, where Moses, here he is 80 years old in the desert, and he is encountering the burning bush. And so within a few short chapters, there's a lot of time. Well, we're covering that, and we're copying through some of this to find out some of the details. That has to do with our question today, and Janice has it for Do You Know?
Yes. So, do you know where Moses fled from Pharaoh when he murdered the Egyptian?
All right, this is a good question. So Moses, here's what happens. He has grown up in the house of Pharaoh. He sees his own people, the Hebrews, being an Egyptian torturing a Hebrew, so he gets mad and he kills the Egyptian. Not a good thing. That's not a proper response. Buries him in the sand to try to hide his mistake. Somebody else, another Hebrew, finds out about it. He realizes the cat's out of the bag, so then he takes off. And he's going to be gone 40 years. Now, do you know, Corey, where he went?
I do. Moses fled to the land of Midian, and he became a shepherd.
The land of Midian, and the time of the judges, this was the land of the Midianites. They were great with camels, by the way. I have a problem with camels, but they were great with camels. Is that right?
You're absolutely right, both of you. Very good. And did you know this, that the name Midian is a personal and clan name meaning strife? Did you know that?
Actually, I did, and I believe it was Amnon and Midianites that were descendants of Lot and his daughter.
And Corey was right. It was here that Moses met the priest of Midian, who had 7 daughters. One of those daughters ended up being the wife of Moses. Do you know what her name is?
Corey, do you know what her name is?
I believe her name is Zipporah.
I concur.
You're both right. Now,
do we get extra points for that?
Probably.
Maybe.
Somebody keeping track of the points? All right,
Do you know what Zipporah means?
Oh.
What Zipporah means? No, I don't. I do not know what Zipporah means.
Well, here it is. It means small bird or sparrow.
Moses married a woman named Small Bird or Sparrow.
Sparrow.
What if she was a small woman?
It's Sippor. Sippor.
So not the.
T-S-I-P-P-O-R. Sippor.
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 Right? Did I say it right? Sippor.
Pretty close.
All right.
And that means sparrow. Now, I got thinking about that, and I did a little bit of research. There's 2 passages. This is just an interesting tidbit. Nothing really related. Well, 2 passages in the New Testament, Matthew 10, 29 to 31, and Luke 12, 6 to 7, both parallel themselves to refer to the sparrow. Now, in these parallel passages, Jesus taught his disciples to have confidence in God's love, the God who cares for all of his creation, even the insignificant sparrow certainly cares for people.
That's interesting. And his eye is on the sparrow. Very interesting.
The sparrow fall from the tree. So if God cares about just even that little creature, the sparrow, think of how much he cares for you and me.
And the father-in-law of Moses, that's Zipporah, her dad, the priest of On, becomes very useful to Moses.
He does
when
indeed.
He gets out in the wilderness. We're going to read about this. He is called 2 names, but one of them is Jethro.
That's right.
And what happens here is he says, Moses, I'm going to help you administer here. So the man probably had some kind of leadership role.
Yes.
He had some kind of administration role in the ancient land to the east of Midian. The Midianites, very interesting, cultures that you find. You're going to do some reports on the Midianites in the future, aren't you, this year, Corey?
I probably am, yes.
All right,
very interesting people.
Corey's on assignment, ladies and gentlemen, for our Bible archaeology, so that's good. This is the Do You Know segment. You're watching Quick Study Television. Just a couple of reminders. First of all, did you know that you can receive a certificate going through the Bible with us? We call it a journey through. And you say, what are you talking about? Well, if you go to our website, it'll explain it, or you can call us. Now, that certificate is if you go through the Bible with us and read all the chapters of the Bible in 1 year with us, Janice has some little quizzes she's put together for you that she's going to send you. You answer them correctly, we're actually going to grade them for you, and at the end of the year, you're going to get a certificate that will be a confirmation that you went through the Bible and successfully understood or comprehended it. And that actually can be used as submission to Phoenix University of Theology or Canada Christian College if you want to for credit. So it's very interesting. To register, you will have to register, and it's not free because there's administration involved. To find out more, call us at 519-940-844 or 8338 or 724-733-8336, or go to our website, BibleDiscoveryTV.com. Check it out there, A Journey Through. This is God's wisdom at work in our lives from Exodus chapter 2. Willing faith in an all-powerful God will never be stopped by Satan's best of the worst. Now the young men of God are being killed in ancient Egypt. The future of Israel is being cut off by a jealous, raging, demon-possessed, despotic dictator in Egypt. So God uses women of faith to save the men of Israel's future. When Satan seeks to destroy God's men, it is a wise woman who steps in to rescue men and not ridicule them. So we pray, Lord, teach your amazing women of faith not to compete with the men, but to build them up in faith for the leadership of our families and communities. Thank you for joining us today on Quick Study. Before we leave, I wanted to mention this. We are studying through the Proverbs in 1 year. And today our reading is Proverbs chapter 3, verses 21 to 26. Here are just a few lines from that proverb. I suggest to read it all later. Do not be afraid of sudden terror, nor of trouble from the wicked when it comes. Now this is for people who want to be looking to God for their strength. The Bible says that the wisdom of God will preserve your emotions and your soul when you understand what's going on. The Bible explains exactly what's going on in these end times and actually reports that there will be a second coming of Jesus Christ. And at that time, all nations will be reconciled to Him. My question to you is, are you ready for the second coming of Christ? You see, the Bible tells us very clearly that if we believe in our heart and confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord, then we shall be saved. There's going to be a reconciliation. The world's not going to continue like this forever. We are very close to a final reconciliation with Jesus Christ. I encourage you, come to Christ today and be ready for His kingdom. Thank you for joining us today on the Quick Study television program. If you would like to find out how to take your faith to the next level, contact our Bible Discovery Seminary for online Bible training. For more information, go to BibleDiscoveryTV.com and click on Bible Discovery Seminary.
Yeah.